Hello there. May I interest you in a goofy story? Oh, I may. All right then. Well, the time I almost died. That's a little bit of clickbait. I don't know if I would have died, but definitely some complications would have happened. Now, you may be thinking, wow, this is probably a cool story, the time this guy almost died. This is pretty wacky. Maybe it was from a shark, maybe he got shot and he survived. Maybe he's really cool. Unfortunately, I'm not that cool. It wasn't a shark. It was because of something that I did myself. Now, I am a biology major. I graduated college with a biology degree. And when you graduate college with a biology degree, you have to do a lot of things that you don't like. For me, that was the entire academic course because I hated biology. But one thing I hated more than all those classes combined are labs. See, in biology, I'm sure a lot of you know, you have labs. You have to actually do experiments. You're messing with very dangerous chemicals. You're messing with fire. You're doing a bunch of stuff. It's a lab. You're making something. You're observing something. One experiment we did that comes to mind, we actually tortured an animal, which was pretty wild. It wasn't like a dog or anything. It was just like a grasshopper or something, but we cut open the grasshopper. It was alive, by the way. It was still alive. We cut it in a way so that it would stay alive, and we put electrical wiring in it, and then we would purposely shock it to see how its heartbeat would change. Absolutely insane, but that is an experiment that we did when I was in college. Now, that's not what the video is about, but I'm just giving you some background. Another thing also to talk about this is that we had one thing I hate is attention. I really dislike attention, especially like when people are like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. I just dislike attention in general. So I will do anything to not get attention. In middle school, I used to want to sneeze a lot, and I would just hold my sneeze in because I didn't want people to, look at me and be like, oh, bless you. Like anything, any sort of attention whatsoever. I was like, no, please, no. I remember when I was younger, I read online on Instagram or something like that. It was like, if you hold in your sneeze, there's a probability that your blood vessels will erupt and you will die instantly. And even though I read that, and I did believe it at the time because I was a kid, right? I did believe that at the time. I still held my sneeze in because I didn't want any attention given to me. And so that's pretty much how far I'll go. But I will go even further than that. I will risk being burned. And that's exactly what happened. I was in a lab one time, and in this lab we had to mess with fire. Well, my teacher was doing this experiment with me. I didn't have a partner at this time because my partner was out sick. So my teacher was like, okay, well, I'll be your partner for this experiment, which was awesome, right? You love when the teacher's your partner for the experiment. You get to finish really quick. Well, my teacher was kind of an idiot, and my teacher decided to light the Bunsen burner, I believe is what it's called. She decided to light it on fire. And, she did that without telling me, and it was right next to me. So it started burning my lab coat. And I didn't realize that my lab coat was literally on fire until I felt my arm, the hairs on my arm were burning. And then my skin started burning. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to make a scene. So I very, very inconspicuously, I look down and I see my lab coat is on fire. And I'm like, oh shoot. And so I grab my hand. Well, I don't grab my hand. I bring my hand over to my lab coat and I start putting out the fire like, oh my God. I'm not really freaking out because like I said, I don't want to draw any attention. But I'm like, Jesus Christ, I got to get this out. My arm is literally on fire. And I did. It worked. The fire got put out and nobody looked at me. Nobody even knew. The teacher, nobody. Now they probably know because at the end of the year or at the end of that semester, we had to put our lab coat in a little Ziploc bag for the students next semester. So they probably noticed, wow, there's a giant hole in this lab coat and it's like burnt. So now they probably know, but many months after that situation happened, nobody knew about it, and I never spoke about it, and I never drew any attention to myself, so nobody noticed. And this story with the time I almost died, I think it's kind of a silly title, but it is what it is. So for this one lab, and this was the thing I hated the most. Basically, I think it was the Organic Chemistry 2 lab, which if you guys are interested in becoming a biology major, this will be the worst class you ever take in your entire life. You're probably going to want to, do some bad things to yourself. It is a really bad class. It is really unfortunate. It sucks, dude. It especially sucks if you have garbage teachers. Don't go to the school I went to if you want some good teachers. But essentially in this lab, what we had to do, OChem 2, is we had to do an entire lab, an entire experiment by ourselves, no help, and the teacher is not telling us how to do it. Basically, all the teacher says is, okay, you guys are going to make this thing, right? You're going to make this thing. All right, go for it. And we have to set up beakers. We have to set up liquids. We have to use syringes and extract liquids from one vial to another. We have to, light stuff on fire, cook stuff. It's a bunch of stuff, a bunch of chemistry, right? It's organic chemistry. So we're doing a bunch of chemistry. And it's a very dangerous class. Most of the chemicals can harm you or kill you. And we had to write every time before we went in the class. The teacher would not let us in the door if we didn't submit a paper every time we went in the class. And the paper basically outlined all the chemicals that we're going to be using in the lab and what their effects are on humans, right? So they would give us a list and they'd be like, okay, there's these 6 chemicals, right? Look up what they do, write it on a piece of paper, submit it to me, and you can basically do the experiment for today and get credit, right? And so, some of these chemicals were, if you inhale this, your eyes are going to water. Another one was, if this gets on your skin, it's going to, go through it. It's going to, it's very acidic. It's going to burn through your skin. Some of it was, if it gets contact with your blood or something, it can stop your heart. It's very dangerous stuff, very scary. And it frightened me every time I went in this class. And I'm so glad it's over with because that's just absolute insanity to me. How, you're going into this class and you're doing this experiment completely by yourself. Nobody's helping you and nobody's telling you how to do it. And you're dealing with all these dangerous chemicals that could harm you, man. And it's the worst class of all time. I really hated it. And so basically when one of these times when we were doing it, so I took Organic Chemistry 1 during COVID. This is a bit of backstory. I took Organic Chemistry 1 during COVID, and because of that, I took the lab online. So I didn't know how to do a lot of these experiments in OChem 2 when they said, okay, go at it, right? I didn't know how to do a fair bit of them, but there were a few where I was really confused and I had to ask for help quite a few times. And one of the times I did ask for help, I had to put my needle, this syringe, this very, very sharp needle. I had to put it in this little tube. And you guys know when you're opening a lid, opening a jar, and you're doing it super hard, right? And you open the jar finally, and you your hand the hand that you're opening the lid with kind of goes back really fast because you're pulling really hard on that lid. So it goes back really fast and then you're like, hold on, I need to correct this. And in a split second, it goes back really fast and then you put it, back where it needs to be, so you don't throw your hand across the room. I hope you guys know what I'm basically trying to get at here. So that's pretty much what it was with the syringe. This liquid that you had to get out was inside of a man. It's like a, I don't even know what it'd be. Maybe a foam. It wasn't foam. It was not plastic. Maybe it was plastic, but it was this thing you had to put the needle through this thing to get to the liquid. And it was very difficult once the needle was through this solid, this solid piece, it was very difficult to pull the syringe back out, right? So I was doing it very, very strongly. Like, oh, come on. I was just getting water at this point. So it wasn't anything crazy. I was getting water to put into my solution. And so I was getting the water out of this thing, and I was like, man, this thing won't come out. And so I was pulling, and I finally pulled it out. But when I pulled it out, my hand went so far back, I tried to correct it and move my hand back to the jar that the liquid was in. And in doing so, I actually stabbed my hand that was holding the jar, and I made myself bleed. So I was bleeding, and I was like, oh, damn, this is really unfortunate. I bled like crazy, by the way. I never looked, because I had gloves on. When you're doing experiments, you always have gloves on, you have goggles, you have a lab coat, closed-toed shoes, stuff like that. So I never saw what the damage was until I was done with the class. It did poke a little hole in my glove, and so I could see a lot of blood, but I never saw until after the class was over with, and I took my gloves off and I threw them in the trash. I was bleeding like crazy. But that's not where the story ends. This next solution, this next liquid that I was dealing with after the water. Now, this was a very, very dangerous one. This one was the one I spoke about earlier, where if it got in your system, it could, it affects your heart. Not could, it does affect your heart. And it slows it down. Maybe, I don't remember what it was. I think it stops it, right? It's a very, 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 very dangerous chemical. And the exact same thing happened with it. So I was doing the same thing. It was in this thing that was so hard to get out. I was like, oh my God, I can't get this thing out. I was pulling like crazy. Finally, I get the syringe out, stab myself again with this one. However, this time I did not bleed. If I did bleed, that would have been very bad, because that would have meant it went really deep in, and I could have hurt myself really bad. I don't know if I would have died. I don't really exactly remember what the liquid was. This was a couple of years ago. It was only like 2 years ago. But yeah, it was very, very dangerous, really crazy. So we actually had a substitute teacher that day. And so the teacher was looking at me while I was doing it, and she saw me stab myself. It was a very quick movement, though. It was like milliseconds, I'm getting a call right now. Spam risk. It was a very quick movement, though. It was like milliseconds, So the teacher, I don't think, was sure that I stabbed myself. But when she saw that, she goes, oh, did you just stab yourself? And I said, no, I didn't. Because this goes back to the thing. I hate attention. I don't want people, so I definitely shouldn't have done that. I should have been like, yes, I did stab myself, because it could have been really dangerous, but I didn't want her to think I'm stupid. I have this really big thing where I don't want people to think I'm stupid, and I guess I'm willing to die over it, right? Because I did not want that lady knowing at all that I stabbed myself, and I was so worried about that. That was the only thing I was thinking about that entire class period. When I took my gloves off and I was looking at my bloody hand, that was the only thing I was thinking about that entire time. That, oh my God, did I is something going to happen to me while I'm driving home? It was like an hour drive from the school to my house. So I was like, oh my God, is something going to happen to me while I'm driving home? Is something going to happen to me tonight? Am I going to wake up? It was really terrifying. But I never told anyone about it. You guys are the only people I'm telling about this. I never told anyone about this. My parents, literally nobody, because I didn't want anyone to worry. And, now it's been 2 years, so obviously I'm fine. But that's just a crazy thing, I didn't want anyone to know so bad. I was willing to risk the craziest thing of all. And, yeah, I just felt like that was a pretty funny story. I thought about this the other day, and I was like, oh, man, this would be a pretty funny story to tell y'all. So, yeah. That's I guess the time I almost died. It was I don't remember the name of the chemical. I could probably find it if I go back in my Word docs. I could probably find that file I submitted and I could tell y'all, but I am not going to do that because I did so many assignments online. I'd have to go through hundreds of stuff, and I'm just not going to do that. But Yeah, it was a very dangerous chemical nonetheless. It did something with your heart. I believe it stopped it. And yeah, it's crazy. It's just crazy to me how they allow kids that are. I mean, I feel like that's something that you shouldn't really be doing in college. I feel like messing with very dangerous chemicals like that all by yourself is something that you should be doing when you're getting like your license to become like a, you know, I don't know, like an anesthetic doctor. What do they call them? The doctors that do anesthesia and all that stuff. I don't know, but like doctors like that deal with very dangerous situations, I feel like that's not something you should be like, okay, college students, here you go, mess with this chemical. I don't know, that's just me. But yeah, that's a story, and that's all I got. Thanks for watching.